Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's video, we will discuss 5 important topics as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your larger understanding of the current affairs. The topics are as follows. In the first article, we will read about the women employment status in our country. Then, in the second article, we will read about the provisions of the Green Credit Program. In the third article, we are going to study about the new solar power rules. Then we will inquire about a species in the news called as Chital or spotted deers. Finally, in the fifth article, we will read about the Consumer Confidence Survey as released by the Reserve Bank of India. In the end, there will be news snippets especially curated for the upcoming prelims examination, so stay tuned. As per the recently released India Employment Report of 2024, the female labor force participation rate in our country stands as low as 37%, which ultimately highlights the issue of the persistent gender inequality in our country. This issue forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the wider theme of issues related to women. So let's first try to inquire the status of women employment in our country as per the Periodic Labor Force Survey, according to which the female labor force participation rate in our country drastically declined from being 39% in 2004 to a worrisome 23% in 2017. Keep this in mind that till the year of 2017, there used to take place a quinquennial employment survey which used to be conducted by the National Sample Survey under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. After which, the same organization conducts the Periodic Labor Force Survey which is released on annual basis, according to which the FLFPR in our country actually improved to 32% in 2022. In urban areas, the FLFPR stands at 25%, while in rural areas it currently stands at 41%, which means that as the percentage of women taking participation in labor force is higher in rural areas in comparison to urban areas. While in rural areas, their decline in the unemployment rate has been from 3.8% in 2018 to 1.8%, it has significantly declined in the urban area from 10.8% to a 7.5%. However, instead of patting our back for such improvements being made, if we compare the LFPR of our country with other countries globally, it represents a bleak picture. Because, for example, for China, such labor force participation rate for women or the women who are in the working age population of 15 to 59 years, out of them 60% participate in the labor force, while as we have seen it is only 32% for India. At the same time, we have less share of women in the workforce in comparison to neighboring countries such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka as well as Nepal. So let's now try to understand what are the causes of such low labor force participation rate of women in our country. The first and foremost is the persisting patriarchal social norms, which are associated with the dual role syndrome, where the women are categorized for their dual role. They are categorized to be having a primary role as a caregiver or to wash the utensils, clean the kitchen, cook the food for the breadwinner of the family, that is a man. And if there is any such occupational opportunity, then that is considered to be a secondary activity, which ultimately leads to gender stereotyping or association of women with less intellectual and physical capability, We all have might seen recently such women memes circulating on social media and have a laugh about it without realizing its larger social consequences. Then it ultimately leads to the issue of son meta preference, which is not only associated with sex selective birth and low sex ratio, which according to National Family Health Survey 5 stand as low as 893 for states such as Haryana. It also leads to low quality of education given to these women and their ultimate underrepresentation in blue and white collar jobs. Thus, we see the swelling of these women in the unaccounted care economy, which can be reflected from their increase in the self-employment as well as unpaid family work, which according to the labor force survey, almost 44% of the women said that domestic work is the primary reason of their withdrawal from the labor force. Then it ultimately causes the time poverty, which according to the World Bank, the woman spends 5 hours a day on unpaid domestic work. Thus, they are time deprived or they have dearth of time to invest in acquiring any new degree or market oriented skill, which ultimately leads to the issue of missing women from the formal sector of the economy, which as you guys can see here that if we talk about the contractual staff in India, the women presents only 12% of that while 88% of that is acquired by the men. Then such unemployment has also been caused because of the changing employment scenario for India, where we have a rising middle income class as can be shown from the rising per capita income, which has actually risen by 35% from the year of 2014. Thus, these women are withdrawn from the labor force as they are not required anymore to contribute into the family income or act as a breadwinner for the family. At the same time, as we know from the periodic labor force survey itself, there is rising issue of unemployment in our country. It ultimately leads to the men who have a higher percentage of unemployment. Thus, it actually leads to the issue of disguised unemployment either in family businesses or agriculture sector. And it also leads to these unemployed men appropriating low paid jobs which were originally and mostly associated with women in our country. Thus, we can see that these low LFPR among the women can also has taken place because of the economic slowdown, which has been caused because of the global shutdown which took place after COVID, and after that the K-shaped recovery which has been faced by several sectors of our economy, especially the women-oriented sectors such as textile and tourism. At the same time, all these issues has actually led to the feminization of agriculture according to the economist, according to which this rise in employment which we are seeing among the women is actually being caused because of the feminization of agriculture, where the men are actually going for non-farm jobs or they are migrating to cities for other level of employments, and thus women are replacing these men in the field of agriculture, which can be seen from the graph here, where we can see that as per the periodic labor force survey, the number of female in agriculture has significantly increased, while in other occupational sectors such as construction, manufacturing and services, it has actually remained steady. Then, even if these women enter into the workforce, they are face several kind of hindrances. For example, the issue of wage gap. According to the report of World Economic Forum, the women in India gets only the 1/5 of labor income when compared to men. Also, as per the World Inequality Report of 2022, 82% of all labor income is actually appropriated by the men, and the remaining 18% share goes to this woman. Then they are further compounded by the safety issues which they face at the workplace. Why? Because 90% of the workforce is employed in the informal sector of the economy, where there is lack of any social security net or any provision of a particular time period for working hours. At the same time, they also have inadequate access to transportation, which ultimately increases their safety issues. And all these issues are being further compounded by the rising issue of digital divide, which you guys can see from the graph that if we look at the share of adults who has smartphones, for men, while it stands at 49%, it is only 26% for the women. So let's say when there was a complete lockdown during the time of pandemic, while the main child has the opportunity or access to smartphones where that person could see the online classes, only 26% of the women in our country had that access. Also, there exists a policy blindness among the government. For example, even though there is a great initiative of Maternity Benefit Act 2017, which provides for paid leave of 26 weeks, but such Maternity Benefit Act is only applied to the formal sector of the economy. Then we can also see the rising issue of sexual harassment at workplace because of the lackadaisical implementation of POSH Act of 2013. Thus, to curb these issues and improve the status of women in our country, the government has taken several steps, which has become imperative because due to this lack of financial independence among the women actually leads to their diminished decision-making power at household, which ultimately causes the lack of family planning, the issue of sex-selective abortions, unwanted pregnancies, and ultimately the maternal mortality ratio, which is as high as 103 among 1 lakh women in our country as per the National Family Health Survey 5. Thus, it completely diminishes our demographic dividend, which is imperative for our economic growth in the future, and this is also reflected from our abysmal ranking in the Global Gender Gap Index of 2023, where we stood at 135th place. So, to curb with these issues, there are several steps which has been taken by the government, such under the larger theme of Shakti, which has two important components. One is Sambal, where we aim to provide safety and security to the women, and the other is Samarth, for the empowerment of women. Thus, to educate the women, the government has taken several initiatives, such as for the sensitization of the larger public, we have launched Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Yojana, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, as well as to put impetus on scientific principles among the women, as well as to increase their inclusion in the STEM field. The government has launched Vigyan Jyoti scheme. And to further provide skills to the women to make them ready for Industry 4.0, there has been launched a fourth phase of the Kaushal Vikas Yojana, under which the women are being trained in the modern day technologies of artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. Then, to create the entrepreneurship among the women, the government has launched Women Entrepreneurship Platform, and to provide them credit support under the PM Mudra scheme. Then, in the budget of 2023, the government also launched Mahila Samman Savings Certificates to provide lucrative investment options for the women. At the same time, we have also been working to provide them sustainable working conditions, for which the government has launched Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act of 2013, the Maternity Benefit Act of 2017, providing them with unpaid leaves. And then there is a National Creche scheme as well. Also, with the Occupational Safety Code of 2020, the government is trying to provide them with safe working conditions even during the time of night. However, as per the report, there are several other initiatives which can be taken, such as to provide impetus on the labor-intensive sector and to ensure the safety of the women and improve the transportation which has been provided to the women, to ensure that there does not take place any other Nirbhaya in our country in the future. With these suggestions, we move forward to the next news of the day. Recently, 10 states have identified parcels of degraded or wasteland under the Green Credit Program for the purpose of afforestation, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the theme of environment conservation. So let's first try to understand the provisions of the Green Credit Program, which was launched at the COP28 of UNFCCC, or United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which took place at Dubai, UAE. Now, this Green Credit Program is an initiative within the Life for Environment or LIFE movement, which was launched at COP26, which took place at Glasgow. And this program has been notified under the provisions of Environment Protection Act of 1986, under which any degraded land is available for afforestation for an individual, for any group such as environment groups, or for public as well as private sector units, where they can afforestate a certain wasteland, and for that purpose they will get green credit, which they can also trade. Now, the procedure to get such green credit program is that any registered or approved entity can do the payment for the afforested land, and the actual afforestation will be done by the state forest departments. Now, one may wonder, what is this green credit actually? This green credit is basically a unit of recognition which is given to an entity for any positive impact which it has delivered on the environment. And this can be traded for monetary compensations. Now, any such evaluation of green credit will actually be done by the International Council of Forest Research and Education, which is basically an autonomous body under the Ministry of Environment. So once the plantation has been done and the tree has been grown for 2 years of time period, such third party evaluation will be done by ICFRE, where the plantation of one tree will get you 1 carbon credit. Now, keep this in mind here, that the generation of green credit under the Environment Protection Act of 1986 is completely different from the carbon credit which one gets under the Carbon Credit Trading Scheme of 2022, which has been notified under the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. So let's try to understand what is the difference between these green credit and carbon credit. The idea of carbon credit originated from the Kyoto Protocol of 2005, which aims to reduce carbon dioxide and 5 other greenhouse gases to ultimately reduce the issue of global warming. This carbon credit is awarded to the countries as the greenhouse gas emission below their emission quota, which has been assigned to them under the Kyoto Protocol. Now, keep this in mind that this carbon credit in our country is brought and traded under the carbon credit trading scheme of 2022. This carbon credit basically implies that if there is a company or a country, it takes action to reduce their carbon footprint, which can be done also from the carbon capturing technology or from just using renewable energy as a source. All that can lead to the reduction in the carbon footprint, and for that you will get a carbon credit. On the other hand, the green credit actually deals with either the tree plantation or the restoration of mangroves, for which we have launched Misty scheme, or for waste management, for which we have a Waste Management Act of 2016, or for the practice of sustainable agriculture, for which we have Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. So all that will actually lead to green credit. Now, this green credit program attempts to replicate this mechanism for environmental actions like water conservation or soil improvements. Thus, the carbon market, as they are more focused on industry corporation, the green credit program can benefit individuals and communities as well. So, compensatory afforestation fund, which was launched in the year of 2016, and it sets up a national authority as well as a state authority, under which any user agency, if it diverts the land for non-forest purposes, let's say for mining, for building a dam, or for the construction of a mall, then that company has to provide the equivalent amount of non-forest land and provide for the compensation for the afforestation which will take place. At the same time, as because of the deforestation, there were certain ecosystem services which was being provided by the forest of that area, the company also needs to provide for the net present value of the ecosystem services of the forest. Then 90% of these collected payments go directly to the state fund and 10% goes to the national fund. This fund can also be used for increasing the forest cover, forest regeneration, as well as for wildlife protection and any related activity to protect green cover. Now, for such afforestation, there lies two important conditions. First is that such wasteland shall be provided within the proximity to the raised forest tract. However, if that is not a possibility and there is unavailability of any such wasteland or degraded land, then the company shall pay twice the amount of the degraded land. Now, several environmentalists and conservation units have raised concern related to this green credit program. The first and foremost being unavailability of contiguous non-forest land. Because many a time, let's say if deforestation has occurred for mining purposes in the state of Odisha, the possibility is that there are a lot of other mining regions in the very same area. So we don't have the availability of any non-forest land or commercially unviable land within the proximity of that raised forest. Thus, even though if the company pays for the afforestation, as the land is not available, there lies an idle corpus funds under the Compensatory Afforestation Management Act or CAMPA, which according to the report, there are 40,000 crore lying in the Compensatory Afforestation Fund, which even excludes the interest or amounts which has been invested in the fixed deposits over a period of time. At the same time, there is rising issue of greenwashing where the company basically lies on the fact that it is taking certain initiatives for afforestation or for the benefit of environment, which is not substantiated by any claim. To understand this, let's take an example that there is a company Pepsi. And Pepsi says that whatever the bottle it is making, it is from 100% recycled plastic waste from ocean. However, we don't have any such standard procedure to check this claim and identify that whether such plastic recycling has been done or not. Then there is a rising issue of compatibility with the carbon credit. As we saw that there is no standard procedure to differentiate that what is exactly a green credit or what is exactly a carbon credit, then there are chances that it might overlap, which can actually benefit the corporations. Finally, the government has also launched for accredited compensatory afforestation under the Forest Conservation Act of 2023, which was covered in the previous analyst lecture. Where, as we saw that now such compensatory afforestation can be done across the country, which basically means that if I am staying in Tamil Nadu and there is a company which is taking development project in the state of Uttarakhand. Now I can grow 1 hectare of land, afforested land in the state of Tamil Nadu, and this company can actually buy that and get green credit. Thus it can show that it is also following the environmental principles while taking the path of development. However, such afforestation in other state or not in the region within the proximity where deforestation has taken place can actually lead to a large scale ecological imbalance. Then the environmentalists have also raised the issue of various kind of shortcomings with the new afforested land, which can actually not replace or provide the ecosystem services which were actually being provided by the actual forest which existed there, and at least not in a short span of time. Thus, the implementation of green credit program requires a multifaceted approach where first and foremost we need to lay down the standard set for what is green credit and what is carbon credit. At the same time, there shall be strategic use of CAMPA funds to achieve two important targets. One is to have 33% of our country's land under the forest as it was envisaged by the National Forest Policy 2017, and to further achieve the Panch Amrit target of carbon neutrality by the year of 2070. Now, with this information, let's try to solve a prelims question which appeared in the year of 2022, which asked the student to identify what is greenwashing. As you guys can see from the first statement, it says conveying a false impression that a company products are actually eco-friendly and environmentally sound, as we saw in the case of Pepsi example. With this, we move forward to the next news of the day. To incentivize India's solar module manufacturing industry, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has framed new rules under the Approved Models and Manufacturers of Solar PV Modules Order of 2019. Now, these issues related to the solar photovoltaic cell and modules in our country forms an important component under your GS3 paper under the theme of energy and industries. So let's first try to understand what is the importance of these solar PV modules in our country. The first and foremost is that India has set for itself an ambitious Panch Amrit target under which we are planning to produce 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by the year of 2030. Now, as per the estimation by World Bank, 280 to 85 gigawatt of this renewable energy shall be derived from the solar energy component. Thus, to increase the manufacturing of solar PV modules in our country and to become self-reliant, we have set ourselves an ambitious target of 50 gigawatt production capacity per year, where we are trying to increase the manufacturing of module as well as domestic cell manufacturing. However, if we inquire the current status of solar module manufacturing in our country, then it represents a completely different picture, where the current solar module manufacturing capacity lingers around 15 gigawatt per year. And we are heavily import reliant on solar PV modules, which we are going to use to generate the solar energy in various solar plants such as Modhera Sun Village or under the rooftop solar schemes, etc. Out of this, 85% is actually imported from four major countries, being China, Vietnam, Malaysia and Singapore. And in the year of 2023, the cost of such imported solar PV modules in our country stood at 90,000 crore, thus significantly impacting our balance of trade as well as balance of payment and making a huge dent on our Atmanirbhar initiative. Now, a curious mind may wonder that what are the causes of such low manufacturing capacity of PV modules in our country. The first is lack of capital investment. Because the manufacturing of such solar PV modules is a convoluted process and it requires a state-of-art facility and huge investments in research and development. While on the other hand, as per the interim budget report of 2024, India spends only 0.7% of its GDP on research and development. Keep this in mind that this is 24 times lower than the investments being made by China. At the same time, the cost of debt in our country, if it is asked by a company who wants to start such a facility, it stands as high as 11%, which is highest debt percentage in Asia, and in China it is only 5%. Then, even if such capital investment is being made, there exists lack of technological know-how, which is reflected from the low percentage of population which is actually skilled to make such advanced technology equipments. As can be seen from the Indian employment report of 2024 as well, only 18% of the workforce had any kind of formal training. Then there are certain barriers which prevents the startups to enter into this manufacturing arena. And the first is that there already exist subsidies for electricity, not renewable energy, for non-renewable energy being produced from coals, thermal power plants, etc. And such subsidies actually leads to low cost of electricity for the consumer, but it hampers the startups because they don't have any profitable initiative even if they enter into this particular area. Then this sector requires technology upgradation every 8 to 10 months and thus requires huge capital, as well as the projects have long gestation period for which the startups in India are not yet ready. At the same time, there exists higher cost of domestic production. The first reason for this is the high cost of raw material in our country. For example, the silicon wafers, which are the most important component of solar PV modules, they are not even made in our country. At the same time, there are several other challenges such as logistical supply chains, high cost of establishing these factories at the first place, and at the same time, there is lack of integrated setup or a supply chain which can actually lead down to decline in the cost of production, and such integrated chains of supply is present in our competing countries such as China, Thailand, etc. Thus, it can be reflected from the graph where you can see that the global module production capacity, which currently exists at 358 gigawatt, India has a meager share of 5%. And in the global cell production capacity, we are even low at 1%. Thus, to deal with this issue, the government has taken several steps. The first is that India has joined the International Solar Alliance for Global Cooperation in this particular sector. The government has also allowed for 100% of foreign direct investment in the renewable energy sector. Then the government launched Atal Jyoti Yojana for the solar electrification of the street lamps, and Pradhan Mantri Kusum Yojana for the solarization of agriculture pumps. At the same time, recently the government has launched Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Yojana, under which we are trying to subsidize 1 crore households to get at least 300 units of electricity every month by the installation of rooftop solar. The government is going to provide collateral-free low-interest loan at around 7% for the households, and it is aiming to reduce the carbon dioxide emission as well as to generate additional income of household as they can sell the extra power to the power purchasing companies. Then the government has also bought this solar PV module manufacturing under the production linked incentive scheme, and it is providing 50% of the project cost for any person who is going to establish a semiconductor fabrication plants. It is in this context that the new solar power rules become very important, as they provide that there shall be a voluntary submission to inspection by these manufacturing facilities from the National Institute of Solar Energy, and there shall be mandatory procurement from the local manufacturers by any person who is selling these solar PV modules. Thus, even under the Pradhan Mantri Kusum Yojana or Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Yojana, there is a certain percentage which has been set, out of which it has to be procured from the domestic and local manufacturers. Thus, the government is taking these steps to ensure that the solar energy capability and production in our country actually enhances, and with which we are able to achieve our ambitious Panchamrit targets by the year of 2030. With this, we move forward to the next news of the day. As per a recent report in Indian Express, the Chital or spotted deers has emerged as an invasive species in the Andaman Island due to their unchecked population growth. This forms an important component for your prelims paper under the larger theme of flora and fauna. So let's first try to inquire about what is Chital or spotted deer. Chital or spotted deer is actually native to the Indian subcontinent, and it has a wide range distribution where it is found from Gujarat in the west to Assam in the west, as well as from south of Terai or from the south of Himalayas to the state of Tamil Nadu, as well as in the Union Territory of Andaman and Nicobar, as we can see from the news. Then this Chital or spotted deer is protected under the Schedule 3 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. However, on the list of International Union for Conservation of Nature, it is listed under the least concerned category for now. Keep this in mind that spotted deer or Chital is the state animal of Telangana. So we move forward to the news. Now let's try to understand that why this Chital has been in the news. Because they have turned out to be an invasive species on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Island, which you guys can see here on the map, which was earlier used to be called as Ross Island, and it lies east to the Port Blair. Now these Chitals were introduced on this island in 1900s for their hunting games. But because of their rampant multiplication and unchecked population growth, they have turned out to be an invasive species, and these more than 500 cheetals have depleted the low ground vegetation in the region. Thus, local authorities are finding it really hard to contain them and is expending around 15 to 20 lakh a month to feed these cheetals. Thus, these local authorities have suggested for their relocation under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Keep this in mind that under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, such relocation or rehabilitation can only be permitted by the Chief Wildlife Warden for scientific purposes. Thus, the Wildlife Institute of India, according to which relocation of such ungulates or cheetal is a very complex process, the Wildlife Institute of India has suggested for a BOMA technique, where such animals are lured into a funnel-like boundary and thus they are directed towards the loading vehicle. And such BOMA technique has been used to capture cheetal or barasingha, right? All these deers and different kind of animals to relocate them and rehabilitate them. Keep this cheetal and BOMA technique very dear to you for the upcoming prelims, and we move forward to the next news of the day. The Consumer Confidence Survey for November 2019 to March 2024 was recently released by the Reserve Bank of India. This Consumer Confidence Survey forms an important component of your prelims paper under the theme of economy. So let's first try to understand the whereabouts of this Consumer Confidence Survey, which is released by the Reserve Bank of India on bi-monthly basis, where it aims to gauge the consumer perception of the prevailing economic conditions. And this is done by posing the consumers a questionnaire which contains important questions such as what is the perception about inflation among the consumers? What is the current employment status of the consumer? Is there any step which the consumer has taken for the job security in the future? And all these questionnaire was at this report was done in 19 major cities and included 6,083 urban households. Keep this in mind that this consumer confidence survey only reflects the urban perceptions as it is not conducted in the rural areas. And this time more than 50% respondents were actually females. So let's try to understand what was the finding of this survey conducted for the period of 2019 to 2024. Well, as per the RBI, it shows the optimism of the consumers in the Indian economy, which is reflected as the current situation index rose by 3.4 points to reaching to 98.5 from the earlier 95.1 in September 2023. And this perception about the current situation of Indian economy went its lowest in the month of May 2021, which showed high level of pessimism when the second wave of COVID was taking place. At the same time, the future expectation index has also increased from 123 to 125. And it was its historically low in the middle of 2019. Now, such indicators for this brilliant future ahead for our Indian economy is actually based upon several parameters such as the general economic situation according to the consumer, the income spending by the consumer, and the employment conditions of the consumer. And these consumers also said that the inflation which exists currently can be considered as moderate. However, as per the inflation expectation survey, which forms the part of this consumer confidence survey, according to the consumers, in the next 3 months, the inflation can go up to as high as 9%, while their estimate for the fiscal year of 2025 is 9.8%. Keep this in mind that as per the RBI's estimate, the inflation for 2025 will be around 4.5 to 5%. Thus, according to the RBI governor, the price uncertainties which prevails, especially in the food sector, will continue to impose challenges for the Indian economy. Thus, the monetary policy which is guided by the repo rate shall remain disinflationary to ensure the sustainability in the Indian economy. With this, we move forward to the next section of the news. Now, in this segment of Prelims Snippets, we are going to cover several important topics as featured in the newspaper, especially curated for your upcoming prelims examination. The first of which is H5N1, also called as bird flu, which is basically an infectious disease in the birds which is caused by the avian influenza type A viruses. Keep this in mind that this H5N1 or bird flu also impacts the human, and the symptoms can range from severe illness to even death. So far, 800 sporadic human H5N1 cases have been reported from over 20 countries, and the fatality rate is as high as 53%. However, the news becomes much more interesting and important from the prelims examination because recently there has been a first case where such H5N1 has also been detected in the cattle, which has raised the concern about its potential transmission routes. Keep this in mind for the prelims and we move forward to the next news, which deals with the world's highest railway bridge in the news, also known as the Chenab Bridge, which at the height of 359 meters is even taller than the Eiffel Tower of Paris, which is around 300 meters tall. This Chenab Bridge connects Bakkal and Kauri villages in the Riasi district of Jammu and Kashmir. And this bridge is part of the larger Udhampur-Srinagar-Baramulla rail link, and an important part of this rail link beside this world's highest railway bridge, which is Chenab Bridge, is the Pir Panjal Tunnel. Keep this in mind that at around 11 km length, it is also the longest rail tunnel in the world. Now we are going to read about another infrastructure achievement of our country in the form of Shinkula Tunnel, which is the world's highest tunnel being created at the height of 16,580 feet by the BRO or Belt and Road Organization, where this Shinkula tunnel is being made near the Janskar river in Ladakh, and it will ultimately connect Lahaul Spiti in Himachal Pradesh to Leh in Ladakh, and it will cross around the regions such as Padum and Nimmu, and it is very important from the perspective of the ongoing conflict on the line of actual control between China and India. Thus, towards the end, we will going to cover the line of actual control, which is basically a disputed line between India and China. Keep this in mind that both the countries refuse to accept this line as a international boundary, as according to India, the length of this line of actual control extends up to 3,800 km, while according to China, it is only 2,000 km. As China majorly disputes over 3 sections of line of actual control, where there is one western section where there is currently going on the Galwan issue. Then there is a central sector in the state of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, and finally there is an eastern sector in the state of Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, which China calls as NEFA or Northeastern Frontier Agency. Now these major reasons in this particular area is such as Demchok and Pangong Taso in Ladakh, Barahoti and Pulansunda in Uttarakhand. Then there is a very strategic pass of Shipkila on the river of Satluj in the state of Himachal Pradesh. And in Arunachal Pradesh, there are certain important passes such as Namkha Chu, Sumodorong Chu, and finally the Dibang Valley. All these reasons are strategically important for our nation's security. And that is why, as we can see with the form of Shinkula Tunnel or the Chenab Bridge, the government has increased infrastructural activity to provide enhanced connectivity to such strategic reasons. With this, we have reached to the end of the discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.